Hi everyone and welcome back. This is video number 2 in the dividing fractions series. So today I'm going to continue using the same method that I used in the previous video, but I'm going to use two fractions that are not unit fractions. So I've decided today I'm going to show 3/4 divided by 1/2. Now spoiler, 3/4 divided by 1/2 is 1.5. Now the question is, why is it 1.5? There are a couple of different methods that you can use. I'm going to show 3 different ways of doing it. So I'm going to show it using folding paper, I'm going to represent it on my number line, and I'm going to show the abstract method. Now when you're using this method, again, as I said in the previous video, you want the students to be able to access the maths here. This is the whole point of using the CRA, or the make, draw, write model, because you want the students to use the process to do their division and multiplication, whatever it is, of fractions. But the reason why this can be so powerful is because it actually shows why and how the process works. Because working through the process individually doesn't always make connections with students, and they often mix up all 4 different operations and the processes used to do them. So today I'm going to show you division of these two, and like always I want you to start with the language. So I want you to change that division word from 3/4 divided by 1/2 to 3/4 how many 1/2s will, or how many 1/2s will fit into or will make up 3/4, because that's essentially what the problem is telling us. So again, we start with the folding paper. Now I, in this instance, am going to actually fold this and then cut the last quarter out to show my 3/4. So this is what I mean. So this is what I've done over here. So I folded my my whole into quarters, and I have then cut out a piece here, because what I like to do when I do these sorts of demonstrations is I like to overlay my my fractions, just to so that we can get a better sense or a better idea of how they actually work. So what you're saying here is, here's my 3/4, how many 1/2s will make up 3/4? So again, I'm trying to save paper here, so this is one that I prepared earlier and that I used in an earlier demonstration. So I want to know, if I had 3/4 of my whole, how many 1/2s will make up this 3/4? So essentially what I do is I go, okay, well, let's try and lay these on top. So I know that at least one of these 1/2s. So 1/2 becomes your new unit. Okay, so this is like fractions as measure. So this is my new unit, and this is, I'm trying to find out how many of these make up the green 3/4. So I know it's at least 1. It's 1, but then I've got this last quarter left, and that will be 1/2 of my 1/2. Okay, so how many halves fit into my 3/4? It is 1 plus another 1/2 of that. So that's why it's 1.5, because it's 1 and another half of that. Okay, so my final answer is 1.5. So I've got 1/2. So the question is, how many 1/2s? So that's the question, and it is 1 and then another 1/2 of that new unit, which makes 1.5. Okay, so how do we represent that on a number line? So again, we start with our first fraction on our number line. So here's my 0, here's my 1, and my 3/4 is going to be here. Okay, so this is the size I am dealing with, and I want to know how many 1/2s fit into that. So this is my 1/2. Okay, so that's my unit. Now I'm going to rub that out, because my half actually goes here. So this is my 1/2. So this is now my new unit. So how many of this length fit into the length of 3/4? That is 1, and then another 1/2 of that length will fit into 3/4. So you can see why the answer is 1 1/2. So that's showing it on a number line. Now, how about when we're using the process? Now, in the previous video, I talked about stay, change, flip, or the keep, change, flip method, and that is basically where we keep the first fraction, we change the division to a multiplication, and we flip the second fraction or the divisor. Now, it's never explained why we do this, so I'm going to explain a little bit as to why. So remember I said in the previous video that this flipping of the numerator and denominator is called finding the reciprocal. And all that means when we find the reciprocal is basically, remember I showed you that I'm looking at my whole and I'm saying how many, now that's a poor example, let me waste the paper and so I can show you properly. Okay, so here is my half. I want to essentially say my half is made up of how many halves, and that is 2. So what you're really saying here is you're saying I want to find 3/4 of my 2. So what is 3/4 of these 2 pieces? So if I was to find my 3/4, 1/2, now you can see why you'd start with an easier example first, but as the students get more practice in this, you can get a little more and more complex with the types of questions that you ask. So when I look at this, what is 3/4 of my 2 halves? It is this. So if this is one of my halves and this is another of my halves, I can see now that 3/4 of these 2 halves is one of my halves and then half of my second half. Now, this is a more complicated way of looking at it. It doesn't always make sense to a lot of people. This is why I like to start with this original method where we're looking at it this way. This method of explaining this reciprocal should come at a later time when the students have been exposed to a lot more of these and a lot more in a simpler context, so maybe some simpler problems. I would not give them anything too complicated when you're trying to use this CRA method in teaching these fractions. Give them something that they can simply apply and simply see, because again, this is not about getting them to build their fractions or make their problem. It is about understanding the process, and that is the whole purpose. So 3/4 times 2/1 is going to be 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 1 is 4, simplifies to 3/2, which is the same as 1 1/2. Okay, so you can see that is 1 1/2. So hopefully that elaborated on the previous video, hopefully starts to make more sense when you're working again with students. Get them to practice some really simple problems and then give them the more abstract method to continue building their skills. So I hope you got something out of this, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.